This is the IOA Podcast, a space for truth, tenderness, and becoming whole, one breath at a time. Welcome, everyone, back to the IOA Podcast, and I'm Dr. Malaika, and I am your host. And welcome back to this space where we heal loudly and live softly together. If you're brand new here, I want you to pull up a chair. I want you to get comfortable. And if you've been with me since the beginning, or even since the beginning of this season, season number 2, you already know how this goes. I just want to thank you for keeping me company in these conversations as we talk about things that impact our lives significantly and that matter to us. I do not take it lightly that you keep coming back. I don't, because it's important for us to have these conversations, and I'm honored that I've been able to create a space that allows us to do that. So you know how this goes. Before we get into today's episode, I want to make sure that we are dealing with all of the housekeeping things. And so in order for people to know we are here and to grow our community, I need you to do something, and that helps us build with intention. Show that this show means something to you, that this podcast has done something for you. I have 3 quick asks. First, I want you to hit the like and subscribe, depending on where you're watching or listening to this. I would like for you to hit that wherever you are listening. So if you're on Apple Podcasts, if you're on Spotify, we're also on iHeartRadio. I'd love for you to hit that like button and subscribe as well. If you are watching on YouTube, you can also subscribe there. This is going to be how you are able to let others know what we are doing, so it will show up for them as well. This is honestly the single most powerful thing that you can do to allow the work to reach more people. Second, if you're on Apple Podcasts specifically, I would love for you to leave a 5-star review with a 1 honest sentence about what the podcast has meant to you. Reviews are what help new listeners to decide whether or not they should trust this show with their time. And so please, if you can do that. And then the last thing that I would say is share an episode. I'm really big on sharing what has worked for you or what has helped you with someone else this week who may be carrying something and needs something that speaks to where they are right now. We know that this is about community, and so that is you putting community into action. And so remember, as always, we put all of our platforms into the show notes so that you can have it to know where you can find us on the Substack companion. The paid subscribers this week will have access to extended practices. So if you're not a paid subscriber to the Substack, this is a way for you to get in on that, because it will be a way for you to get some additional materials that go with the episode. So I would encourage you, if you can, to subscribe to the Substack. So the information is here, theioa.substack.com. And there will always be more things that go with this particular episode. Every week, there is always something there. And so I want us to really get into our conversation, because this conversation has been one that I feel like, if I'm being honest, I've danced around a lot during the show, and it is something that we need to talk about. It's important. We're seeing it every day, and I want us to put language to what we're dealing with. So today's episode is aptly titled, "What Happens to Us When Our History, Our Culture, and Our Identity." And so remember, we're really big about talking about identity when these things are under attack. And that's what we are seeing. So we are going to take our first break of the episode, and we will be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone, to the Iowa podcast. And we are going to get into talking about what happens when your history, your culture, and your identity are under attack. I want to start by naming the air around us that we as a people are breathing, because I feel like a lot of us are walking around, we're exhausted, we're sad, we're anxious, and we cannot quite point to the one thing that explains why we're feeling what we're feeling. And then someone says something to you, or you scroll past a headline, or you're on social media, you sit down to dinner and somebody says something, and the way it hits you is almost like a wave. And you're trying to figure out, where are these emotions coming from? Why are you crying in the car at 4 p.m. for no specific reason? There is a reason. And the reason is we are living currently in a season where history is being rewritten, our culture is under attack, and identity is being treated as a political problem to manage instead of a human reality to honor. And whether or not you are paying close attention to the news, your nervous system is actually paying attention. Your body is keeping the score. Book bans, rollback of DEI, legislative attacks on Black studies, on the rights of teachers to teach our actual history. Even if there are things in here that may not be things that you align with personally, all of these things have a cumulative effect. They're moving through your body, whether you talk about it or not at dinner or with other people. So let me just give you a small picture of what this looks like. I had a person, and they talked about the fact that they had been crying almost every morning for a consistent period of time. It was a little bit over a week, and could not figure out why. Nothing had changed. Dramatic, like life was literally the same, very consistent. Marriage is steady, kids are stable, work was fine. But every morning the tears were coming, and trying to figure out the source of it was the biggest stressor that they were dealing with in the moment. And so what had actually surfaced is basically realizing that one of the school districts in which her grandchildren were students in voted to remove the entire Black history curriculum from their school. So it wasn't something that was posted about. It wasn't something that she had gone to a meeting about. She wasn't even in discussion with anyone about this particular thing, but her body had been going through the weeping for an extended period of time. So although she wasn't having the conversations, her body still knew what was going on, because as we've talked in previous episodes, the body always knows. So this episode is for any of us who have been carrying this weight quietly, for any of us who are tired of explaining ourselves and our existence. It's for anyone who has watched a workplace or a school district or a state or a country decide that the version of you that took a lifetime for you to become and to claim and to honor and respect is now somehow controversial. For anyone whose name has been mispronounced, which is me. I was literally at the doctor recently, and every time they called me up for something, I think my name was pronounced right once, and I kept correcting them, right? I'm learning that that's part of my identity, that it's okay for me to correct people, to be able to address me as who I am. So if you're one of those people who's had the mispronounced names, even if it was done as a microaggression, I'm not saying that that's what this was yesterday, but again, it does happen. If you are a person whose culture has been called a curriculum issue, if your identity has been turned into a campaign talking point, then I want you to know that I see you, I hear you, I feel you. And what I want us to do today is to give language, framework, and a practice that we can actually go back to as we're going through these experiences. Because when we don't have language for the things that we're experiencing, we tend to internalize those experiences. We'll make it our fault. We'll think that we're the problem. And I want you to know that you are not the problem. The hostility that you're experiencing because of your existence is the problem. Your survival inside of this hostility is sacred. So today, we're going to walk through three things. We're going to draw from chapters of Rooted in Resilience that I keep coming back to in this particular season of the show. I keep coming back to the name, I keep coming back to the voice, and I keep coming to the chapter on the disruption. Each of these is a doorway into how to stay rooted when the soil itself that you are potted in or rooted in is being attacked. We are going to talk about what it does to the body when the culture treats your existence as a question that needs to be debated. We're going to talk about what to do on a daily basis to tend to yourself through all of the things that you are experiencing. So this, again, not an episode about politics. This is an episode about people. It's about us. It's about what it costs to be alive in a moment that is about certain communities that have to keep proving that they deserve to be here. So let's begin the work. Welcome back, everyone. And we are about to get into doing the work for this particular episode. And so I want us to talk about first what this does to our body, because it's always where I start. Remember, the body is where the receipts are kept. And so I don't feel like we can discuss any of this without talking about our foundation. When you live inside a culture that treats your identity as a controversy, your body is now learning to do a particular kind of labor. It's basically the labor of constant vigilance. It's constant translation, it's constant proof. You walk into a room and you do a quick scan to basically see who is safe, who is not, what tone do I need to use, how much of myself can I bring into this space today. That scan does not feel like work because you've been doing it your whole life, but it is work. And it's also metabolic. So it costs you something every single time that you do it. There's a lot of research on this. And so the clinical term for this is minority stress. And what minority stress is chronic additional psychological burdens that are carried by people who belong to groups that are systematically devalued, disenfranchised, surveilled, or attacked. It is not the same as the regular stresses that everybody experiences. It's actually layered on top of those regular stresses. It is the cost of being Black in a meeting where you're the only one there. It's the cost of being a person that existence is significantly different compared to all the other people in your space. It's the cost of being an immigrant in a country that is rewriting the rules of belonging, it seems like, every 6 months. Minority stress shows up in the body the same way other chronic stress shows up. It's going to elevate your cortisol. It's going to disrupt your sleep. It can cause inflammation. It can cause hypervigilance, gastrointestinal distress. You can have autoimmune flares. It can cause depression and anxiety. It shows up earlier and harder for people who have been carrying it longer. And the body doesn't just suddenly start carrying it the day that you get the news or there's a bad news cycle. That's not when it happens. The body has been carrying this. So what is happening for us is that the news cycles that we're living through just amplify the volume of what our body has already been taking in. I want to name something that I don't think we talk about enough. And that is that some of you are feeling right now is actually grief. And I've said this before in previous episodes. It is the grief of watching the gains that we fought for be unraveled. The grief of realizing that the win was never permanent. The grief of having to defend again something that we really thought was settled a long time ago. That grief is real. It deserves to also be honored and not dismissed as just simply politics. When someone asks you why you are so tired and you cannot point to one thing, the answer might be that you are grieving in slow motion. And the grief is not going to be loud, but it is going to be ambient. You'll feel it in the air. Your body is basically doing its best to hold it together while you keep showing up for everything else. There's also another layer here. For many of us, what is being attacked right now is not just our identity, it's our lineage. It is the people we came from, the books they wrote, the history they made, the names that they fought to keep. When someone bans a book about your foremothers and forefathers, they're not just banning a book, they're trying to make them disappear from the public record. And your body knows that. Your body is registering that this is an attack on your roots. There's another piece of this that I want to add, and I think that we have to say this. When the culture is hostile to your identity, your community becomes your medicine, and it becomes something that's not optional. Time with people who recognize you in your wholeness and respect and honor that, who do not need you to explain yourself to them, who you don't flinch by being in the room with them when you bring your whole self, that kind of time is not a luxury. It's not leisure. That is your treatment time. Your nervous system needs to be sustained by repeated exposure to safe spaces instead of repeated exposures to the stress or the threat. So look at community as your medicine and look at it as the dosage. So every time we have a barbecue or a sister circle, or we go to our gym group or have our reading book club, or we get on a phone call with someone, these are not just nice to have. These are almost clinical interventions disguised as part of our social life. So if you've been isolating, if you've been telling yourself that you do not have time for these gatherings, if you've been picking screens over people because it's easier, I need you to hear me. The screen is part of what is wearing you down. So if you don't remember, go back to the episode that I talked about when I talked about social media and what it does to our nervous system. People are part of what part of what helps put you back together. Your phone on your loneliest day cannot do that. It does not regulate your nervous system, but a long hug from someone can. An embrace from a person that knows your full name absolutely can do that. So if your roots you feel are under attack, then this is the time for you to do what you need to do in order to serve that space, heal that space so that you can continue to bloom. This is the work of this season. The work of tending ourselves while we go through this process has to start at our roots. And the roots are going to be tended in community. We're going to talk about how to do that in our next segment. Let's take our break and we'll be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. And I want us to get into talking about the name. So the first chapter that I mentioned in the framework that I wanted us to approach today from the book Rooted in Resilience is the name. And I feel like the name is an important part of the clinical context of what we talk about on this show. To name something is to call it into being. And in a season where people are trying to unname us, the practice of naming ourselves correctly is most definitely a sacred resistance. So the first chapter of the book, like I said, that we're going to look at is the name. And it's because the name is something being called into being. So it's speaking it into what it is. And we're in a season where people are trying to unname us. They are trying to tell us that we don't exist or to reverse what we know to be. So the practice of naming ourselves, like I said, is that sacred resistance. Let me tell you what I mean. In Rooted in Resilience, I write about the Aiken tradition of names. In Aiken culture, the day of the week that you are born on gives you a name. So the name is not just a label, it basically carries a spiritual energy of the day. The name is a kind of inheritance. It tells you every time you hear it who you are, where you came from, and what you are made of. And that is what a name is supposed to do. It's supposed to root you. But in this country, for many of us, names have been a site of violence. Our names were taken from us, our names were changed at Ellis Island, our names were anglicized so that we could survive the workplace. Our names were mispronounced as a power move. Our names were softened so that we would not be threatening to others. Our names were Americanized so that our resumes would get callbacks. And we did all of that just to survive. So we're not to blame for any of it, but there comes a moment in our healing when we have to ask the question, what does my name actually want to be? Who has been waiting underneath the version I have been given to the world? When the culture is attacking your identity, the practice of naming yourself rightly is not being vain. It's actually medicine. It's telling your nervous system every time that you hear your own name said correctly that you're still here, you have not been erased, you have not been edited, you are intact. This is one of the reasons that I have been so insistent, like I've said, in the last few years of saying my name out loud. I don't introduce myself as Dr. Malaika to people. I introduce myself the way I was named by my father. My father named me Malaika Monique Garrett Brown, clearly is my married name. I don't say it in a way to make it passable. I don't try to give it a nickname, although I do have a nickname, which is really just a shortened version of my name. I don't do that. I take up space with my name the way it was designed to take up space. Because every time I do that, I'm rerouting the muscle memory of 1,000 rooms where I made myself smaller before so that someone else will know that it's not an inconvenience for me to bring my full self into the space. I want to invite you to do that this week. Do an audit. And it doesn't have to be heavy, just a gentle one. Just notice how you say your own name in different rooms. Notice when you're shrinking it. Notice when you let it stand. Notice whose comfort you are managing when you make it easier for people to say your name than it actually is. You do not have to change anything yet. You just have to start taking notice because the change starts in you noticing what the patterns are. Change is going to start in the moment you realize, oh, I've been doing something to myself this whole time that no one asked me to do, and I don't have to do this anymore. You are still translating yourself for rooms that, frankly, have had enough chances. They've had enough opportunity to get this right. Stop giving them chances. And listen, this is not about being righteous. This is not about correcting strangers in line at the coffee shop. This is about the inner posture that you carry towards your own name, which is part of your identity. The relationship that you have with the sound of it in your mouth. The relationship is a relationship that you have with the lineage that name gave you. It deserves your tenderness. Names are roots. Names are roots, and roots are how the fern survives. So the name you carry is older than this news cycle. The name you carry will outlast it. And if you do not know your name in your ancestral tongue, that is not a failure. That is an information. This is a piece of inheritance that got interrupted somewhere along the way. You're allowed to go back and do the work of finding it. You're allowed to choose a name for yourself in this lifetime if the names you were given you feel like do not fit who you are. You can add a middle name if you didn't have one. You can have a spiritual name, a name your grandmother called you that no one else used. The names are not fixed. The name is a living thing, and tending to it is part of the work. One of the things I discovered when I went to Ghana and found my Akin Day name of Abana, because I was born on a Tuesday, is just realizing that even at that age of 50, which is when I got the name, because that was the first time I went to Ghana, that I had the ability to, even in all of the wonder and the knowledge that I had of being Malika, I had the opportunity to add another layer on top of that. And so I thought that that was amazing because it was like the phoenix, it was a rebirth. It wasn't that I didn't know my name and understand why I was named this and what it meant, but now I was able to add a little bit more and on top of that to give more depth and more connection to the root. And you can do the same. So now let's take another break and we'll come back and we're going to get into talking about the voice. We will be back in just a second. So let's get into talking about the voice. And I want us to be careful here because the voice, I feel like, is a complicated subject in a season like what we're experiencing and living through right now. There are people who will tell you that the right response to a hostile culture is to speak up loud all the time, every time. Post about it, confront it, use your voice. There's real truth in that. Silence has historically been weaponized against communities like ours, and the courage of the people who refuse to be silent is part of how we got here. But there are also people who will tell you that your voice is a precious resource and that you don't owe it to the public to perform anything when it comes to your pain, that you can preserve your voice for rooms where it will be heard. It also will tell you that you do not have to make a statement every time the news is asking you to do so. I believe that there are no absolutes, and I believe in the ability for things, more than one thing, to be true at the same time. I believe that both of these things are true. I believe that both of these things are right. And the work of healing is figuring out in one specific body, your specific life, when to use your voice loudly and when to preserve it. Here's what I've learned. The voice that comes from a body in burnout is not going to be the same voice that comes from a body that's rooted. So when you speak from exhaustion, you tend to perform certainty you do not actually feel. You'll be more reactive instead of being grounded. You tend to be sharp in ways that hurt you later. They make you feel further from the truth instead of closer to it. So the voice that comes from a rooted body will display and speak differently. It'll be slower. It'll be clearer. It can disagree without disintegrating what's happening in the moment. It can hold complex things without collapsing into just a soundbite. So if you've been feeling like your voice is loud but tired, you're basically saying the right things but not actually being heard. This is not because you're saying the wrong things. It's because your voice needs to come back home to a more rested, grounded body. The voice is the downstream of the body, always. Here's what I want you to consider. You can do it this week. Number one, where have you been speaking from exhaustion? 2, where have you been silent because silence felt like the only option when you actually had voice that was available and you were just out of practice? 3, whose voice do you trust to clarify your own? And have you been spending time in that voice on purpose, or have you been letting the louder voices in the algorithm or in the room decide what you are thinking about today? Curate your voice intake. The voices that you spend the most time listening to are the ones that are shaping the voice that will come out of your mouth. If you have been spending hours a day inside angry voices, your voice will start to sound angry. If you've been spending hours a day listening to grounded voices, your voice will start to sound grounded. It's not weakness, it's simple biology. The body becomes what it's exposed to. That's conditioning. So choose your exposures wisely. And just one more thing I want to say on this. Your voice is not only what you post. Your voice is what you say to the people at the dinner table with you. It's what you say to the colleague at the water cooler at work. It's what you say to your child in your house when they're asking about the things that are going on in the world. Those quieter uses of your voice may matter more than anything you could possibly do publicly. The micro conversations build the macro culture. Tend to that small voice. The small voice is where the real changes actually live in our life. And here's the part that I think no one likes to say out loud. Sometimes your voice will cost you. It will cost you a relationship that you could not hold your wholeness in. It will cost you a workplace that wanted a softer version of you. It will cost you a comfort you were used to. And the cost is definitely real. I'm not going to dress it up as if it's not. But the cost of not using your voice in the long run is steeper than staying in those situations, because a voice that has been suppressed for too long does not just go quiet, it goes inward. It becomes self-criticizing. Depression, rage, all of these things can start to boil up inside of you. Your voice was designed to move. It was designed to leave your body and enter the world. So when it doesn't get the opportunity to do that, it stays in your body and starts to corrode you from the inside out. So the question is not whether or not your voice will cost you. The question is which cost you're willing to live with, and only you can answer that question. Going to take another break, and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the disruption. We will be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. And we are going to get into talking about the disruption. And then I also want to give you a practice. So this is the third chapter that I mentioned at the top of the show that we're going to talk about. And I want us to spend some time here because this is the chapter that most of us are living inside of right now. Disruption is what happens when the ground that you're standing on starts to shift. The law is changing. Cultural consensus that we thought we had way back when settled on turns out to be a temporary truce. Something we counted on is not working anymore. Disruption is destabilizing by definition. And we're living in a season of compound disruption. Economic disruption, cultural disruption, political disruption, climatic disruption, technological disruption. The ground is shifting in every direction at once. The instinct when the ground is shifting is to either freeze or sprint, to shut down completely or run frantically the other direction. Both of those are nervous system responses. Both of those are understandable, but neither one of them are sustainable. What I have learned in my own body and in my own therapy practice is that disruption requires a different posture. The posture that it requires is being rooted but flexible. The posture is like a tree in a storm. You're connected in the ground deeply while the upper branches may move with the storm. It doesn't fight against it. It doesn't pretend that the wind is not there and it's not blowing. It stays rooted while the wind passes through. And eventually you notice that it's still standing. So now the question is, how do you become the tree? You build your roots on purpose every day in small ways, but you need to do it before the storm comes. Here's a practice for this week that I'm calling the 3 R's of rooted disruption: reality, refuge, and resistance. So reality, once a day, take 3 minutes to be with what is actually happening. Not the doom scroll, not the panic spiral, just 3 minutes of honest acknowledgement. Today, this is what is true. This is what is hard. This is what I'm feeling about it. The Aya pause in this moment is your doorway here. Do 3 breaths, 3 minutes. Acknowledge the reality without dressing it up and making it bigger than it is. And that is going to be the first part of this. The next one is refuge. Once a day, take 10 minutes to be inside a space that's not under attack. It could be a walk, it could be a song that's important to you. Whatever that may be, you need to go into that thing. And the reason being is it's going to be important. It could be the music that your grandmother loved. It could be food that is nostalgic for you. The refuge is going to be your recovery. The body cannot stay rooted if it never gets to be in the soil that feeds it. And I want to make sure that I'm really clear with what I say here, because I need you all to hear me, and I need you all to hear me clearly, because sometimes what ends up happening is you guys are not hearing the message. And so I want to make sure I say this in a way that you receive it. If you've been telling yourself that you do not deserve refuge until you've done more, or you've accomplished something, until you fought harder, until you've organized better, or if you reached something, please stop doing that. Refuge is not a reward for work. Refuge is actually the fuel that you need to do the work. Our foremothers and forefathers had the different things. They had their porches, their kitchens, right? The people that they were in community with. They did not earn those things by suffering more. Those things were how they were able to keep going through it all. You are allowed to take refuge today. You are required to take refuge today. The work waits for you on the other side of the rest, and the work will be better for the rest you took. And then the last one is resistance. Once a week, do one small act that contradicts the message the culture is sending you. Wear your hair the way you want to wear it, right? Use your full name. Don't abbreviate it. Don't give them a nickname. Use your full name. Speak your language out loud with pride. Buy a book from a Black-owned bookstore. Write the letter to the school board. Show up to a vigil. Give funds towards a legal defense fund. The act doesn't have to be big. It just has to be true to who you are. Resistance is what keeps the roots connected to the next generation. And resistance is how we tell our descendants that we did not stay silent in this moment. I want to add something that I think is important here. Resistance is not always going to be public. Resistance can be teaching your child or grandchild the history that the school district just tried to erase. Resistance could be cooking the food that fed your great-grandmother and refusing to apologize for the smell. Resistance can be raising your voice in a department meeting when you have for years been quiet and been small. Resistance can be raising your voice softer when you have for years been shouting. Resistance is the act of staying recognizable to yourself in a moment that is asking you to disappear. The form is not the point. The fidelity is the point. So reality, refuge, resistance. 3 practices, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, doesn't matter. 1 act per day, per week. This is the rhythm of a rooted life in a disruptive season. I want you to acknowledge which one is going to work for you and lean into that this week. This is the body work that I'm asking you to do. The body is the residence of all this healing. Heal your roots first so that the root system is deep enough to find water even when the surface is not offering any. Your root system is still going to be working if you're tending to it properly. So make sure that you tend to it. We're going to take our final break of the episode, and we're going to come back and we're going to close out the show. Be back in just a second. Welcome back, everyone. And before we get out of here, I want to just remind us to like and subscribe to the show if you haven't already done that. I want to give a shout out. I forgot to do it at the beginning of the episode to the listeners at WDJY in the city of Atlanta, Georgia. I continue to be grateful to have the opportunity to be in relationship with them. And I want to shout them out for riding with me and listening to the episodes as they come out. But remember, you can like and subscribe on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and make sure you are getting into the community so that you can be a part of these conversations regularly. So before I close, I want to say this directly to whoever needs it. You're not crazy. You're not being too sensitive. You're not making things bigger than what they are. The thing that you are feeling is actually real. The exhaustion that you're feeling actually has a cause. The grief that you're going through has a source, and the anger has a reason. You're not the problem. The hostility that you're experiencing is the problem. The fact that you are still showing up, you're still loving people in your life, you're still doing the work that needs to be done, is one of the most underrated acts of courage in our generation. Our forefathers and mothers did not have the luxury of looking away from what was happening to them. They handled it with prayer, with song, with class, with brother and sisterhood, with the table, the church, all the different ways that they made it through. We have inherited those technologies. We get to use them now. We're not in this alone, and we're not the first people to live through a season like this. The people we come from have been here before. They left us a map. They left us a blueprint. So to the educator who was being told what you can and cannot teach, I see you. The chapter you keep alive in your own classroom and your own conversations with your students is part of the record. You're doing it quietly, but faithfully. You're keeping a line open. That counts. To the parent who is figuring out how to talk to your children about why their library is smaller this year, I see you. The conversations that you're having around the kitchen table are actually curriculum. To the young person who is watching all of this happening and wondering if your existence is going to be debated for the rest of your life, I see you too. The answer is your existence is not a debate. It is a fact. You are allowed to be exactly who you are. And the people who came before you fought so that you could. Here's what I want you to take with you this week. 1, your body is keeping the scores, keeping the receipts. Minority stress is real. The exhaustion is data, not weakness. 2, your name is a root. The way you say your own name is a relationship with your lineage. Tend to that relationship. And 3, your voice is downstream of your body. Speak from rest when you can. Curate the voices that you let into your ears. And 4, the 3 R's of rooted disruption that I gave you: reality, refuge, and resistance. 3 minutes of reality, 10 minutes of refuge, 1 act of resistance. I want you to do that this week. And then 5, remember, you are never alone. You're not the first, you won't be the last, and the people that came before us left a map. So remember, the Substack companion for this episode is now live with extended reflection prompts and longer practices for our paid subscribers, a guided naming ritual to do with yourself this week. Also, there will be links in the show notes for those of you who would like to get this information. If this episode landed for you in some kind of way, if it hit you in a way that you really need it, please send it to one person in your life who has been quietly worn down by the air that we're breathing. Sometimes the most healing thing that we can hand each other is the words that we have been not able to find on our own. That is community care in action. Again, I'll say it one more time before we get out of here. Don't forget to subscribe, review, share. That's how the work keeps reaching the people who need it. And then next week in episode 32, we're going to talk about truth telling. Truth telling. And why honesty is one of the most underrated practices that we have. And it seems like it's a lost art in today's climate and society. We'll talk about image management, why it's a tax, We'll talk about what it actually looks like to tell the truth from a body that's rooted. And I am so excited and cannot wait to be able to have this discussion with you. So until then, I want you to breathe slowly, take your eye a pause, say your full name out loud at least once today. Let your roots remember themselves. I'm Dr. Malaika. This is the IOA. We're healing loudly and living softly together. And I will see you next Tuesday. This is the IOA podcast, a space for truth, tenderness, and becoming whole, one breath at a time. Make sure to like and subscribe.